ReZero, Volume 1, Chapter 5, Part 1, Starting Life in Another World. I'm so glad you're here. I won't let you get away this time. Upon seeing the girl, Natsatella walk in through the door, Felt wordlessly stepped back. Felt looked mortified, and her mouth twisted in frustration. You really are a persistent woman, aren't you? Why couldn't you just give up already? Said Felt, sounding as though she was on the verge of grinding her teeth together. Unfortunately, this is not something I can give up on. If you'll be a good girl and hand it over, I won't hurt you, replied Natsatella, the tone of her voice incredibly cold. As Subaru felt the tension of the atmosphere in the cellar rise, he couldn't help but shiver. Why was Natsatella here? The sun had only just begun to set. The first time around, he and Natsatella hadn't even reached the entrance to the slums yet. By the time they had reached the loot cellar, the sun was completely down. Which must mean that without me, she would have found this place a lot faster. Even if Natsatella hadn't run into Subaru in the alley and healed him, she would have found this place all on her own. Subaru couldn't describe how he felt, with the uselessness of his actions across both space and time so thoroughly proven. But even as he drowned in his empty feelings, the situation advanced without him. As Fel continued to step back, she had already crossed from the center of the room to the back, and Natsatella, while continuing to block the exit, changed her stance and pointed her palm forward. With the faint sound of shattering air, Satella activated her magic. It seemed that her specialty really was ice magic, and as icicles formed in the air in front of the palm of her hand, the temperature of the room dropped. I only have one demand of you. Return my badge. It is very precious to me. There were 6 icicles floating in the air. The tips were rounded, so that their power seemed more in their weight rather than their sharpness. However, it was clear that if one hit, it would do far more damage than if a stone were thrown. Of course, Subaru himself was counted amongst the possible targets, and so he tried his best not to incite Natsatella, just wordlessly looking on. Ram, called Felt, a little over a whisper.
I can't make a move. It's your fault for bringing in such a troublesome thing, along with such a troublesome opponent, Felt,
replied Ram. His giant body tensed as he shook his head. Ram had, at some point, grabbed his club, and still held it in his hand. But his arm was slack, and he didn't look ready to swing it. He seemed to be gripping and releasing it, as though he was still hesitating. You're gonna give up before the fight's even started? Said Felt, challenging Ram.
If this were an ordinary magic user, I wouldn't be complaining, but this one's a problem,
replied Ram with a hint of admonishment in his voice, narrowing his eyes as he looked at Natsatella. In Ram's stare, as he looked down at her, was both an extreme sense of caution and an element of awe.
You're an elf, aren't you, miss?
Said Ram, his lips shaking. Subaru looked up reflexively. Ram suggested that she was an elf, but that would make him only half right. Subaru knew from what Natsatella had told him about herself the first time around. Upon hearing Ram's question, Natsatella closed her eyes for a few moments, and then after a small sigh, she responded. Technically, you're mistaken. Only half of what I am is an elf, she said in a tone as if she were making a painful confession, and Subaru furrowed his brow. However, the other two had a much more exaggerated reaction, especially Felt, and with a shudder she continued to step back and said, half-elf? And with silver hair? You can't be. I'm not her. We only look the same. It's a problem for me too. Subaru didn't know what was going on, but he could tell that this was a conversation that Natsatella didn't want to be having. However, Natsatella's denial didn't seem to calm Felt down. Rather, it put her even more on edge, and she turned her red eyes full of animosity towards Subaru, who was still standing silently on the sidelines. You set me up, didn't you? What? I thought it was fishy when you said you wanted to return this thing to its owner. The fact that you kept me from hiring people to block her way was also part of the plan, wasn't it? You two are in this together, aren't you? As Felt said those words, gushing full of hatred, Subaru realized a few things. 1. That Felt was having another misunderstanding. But secondly, why Natsatella was able to find this place in such a short time. Normally, it really would be impossible for her to reach the loot cellar in this short amount of time. Normally, Felt would have hired people from the slums to get Nosatella's way, delaying her arrival. Because Subaru had rushed Felt and stopped her from doing that, Nosatella had been able to come straight here. While Felt's doubts were untrue, they weren't very far off. It was true that the current situation was moving in Subaru's favor. Subaru did want to get the badge and return it to Nosatella himself so he could receive her praise, but as long as she got it back, he wouldn't complain. If things kept going at this rate, it would work as a nice backup plan. However... Huh? What do you mean? You two aren't together? Nosatella seemed puzzled as to why Felt was turning on Subaru, but Felt just laughed. Ha! Cut the act! I'm the one who's backed in a corner here. Go ahead and take this badge from me and laugh at my stupidity, why don't you? Oh, come on. Just because you're at a slight disadvantage doesn't mean you have to cave so easily, replied Subaru. That's all you have to say after bringing this girl here? Damn it, I've been had, said Felt, roughly scratching at her blonde hair and clicking her tongue. Satella seemed to frown at Felt's far from ladylike attitude, and Subaru gulped at the dangerous state of circumstances and misunderstandings, not knowing where to fix his gaze. As Subaru looked around, he realized that there was a red flower decoration pinned to the left breast of Nosatella's cloak. Huh, Subaru sighed, and then smiled. All of his hesitation, up to this point, just seemed so stupid now. Seeing Nosatella's stern expression and attitude had reminded Subaru of the way she had rejected him on his last loop, and had caused him to be unable to do anything. However, he knew that no matter how many times he looped back, Nosatella and her core wouldn't change. The fact that she had saved that little lost girl this time as well was proof of that. The more we talk about this, the more confusing it's going to get. So Felt, why don't you just go ahead and give that badge back? Now you should take it and get out of here, so you don't get it stolen from you again. Why are you acting like you know me all of a sudden? I really don't get what's going on here, said Nosatella. I don't know what's going on here either. Just who do you think you are? Asked Felt, looking at Subaru. Subaru had tried to get things moving again and change the mood, but Subaru only got turned on by both girls and failed to get anywhere. Subaru looked to Rom for help, but...
It's a magic user we're dealing with. I can't really make any moves. Don't be so hasty,
replied Rom, misunderstanding what Subaru was trying to say. This old man's useless, thought Subaru, just barely holding himself back from clicking his tongue in irritation, then trying to figure out how he was going to respond to both girls' stares. But just then, a black shadow silently seemed to slide in and creep up behind the girl with the silver hair. Puck! Block! A sensual smile melted into the shadows and raced forwards, and a silver glint seemed to squirm as it lunged towards Nosatella's white neck. In that instant, with Subaru's eyes opened wide, the girl's head went flying. At least it would have. There was a loud clash, not the sound of steel cutting through bone, but of steel shattering glass. As Nosatella was thrown slightly forwards, there was a bluish-white magic circle activated behind her head. The light of the magic circle took the tip of the blade, and it just barely kept the silver-haired girl alive. Nosatella then leapt forwards and turned around, her silver hair waving, and behind that curtain of hair, Subaru could see a gray-colored furry animal standing. Puck lifted up its nose, proud of its save before looking toward Subaru. That was just in the nick of time there. You saved us. Nice going there, Puck. Really, I'm the one who saved. Thanks, said Subaru, giving the cat a thumbs up, even as he was still shaken. It was still before the sun had set. In other words, Nosatella's very reliable backup partner was still on its working hours. Subaru's quick response was important, but it was due to Puck's amazing performance that Nosatella was still safe. As for the aggressor, her surprise attack blocked. A spirit, huh? That's wonderful. I haven't ever opened the stomach of a spirit before. Lifting her dangerous weapon in front of her face, the woman's expression was one of ecstasy. It was the murderer Subaru had seen so many times before, Elsa. Both Subaru and Nasatella were immediately on guard in response to the sudden new arrival, but the first one to react was neither of them. "Hey, what's the meaning of this?" Felt yelled, stepping forward with her voice raised in anger. Felt pointed a finger at Elsa and then took the badge out of her pocket with her other hand. "All you're supposed to do is buy this badge from me. Turning this place into a bloodbath was not part of our agreement." "Buying the stolen badge from you is certainly what I came here to do, but it's hard to hold any negotiations if its owner has already come and taken it away, so I decided on a change of plans." Felt's face was red with anger, but upon seeing Elsa's eyes fixed on her, wet with murderous intent, she gulped. Elsa looked on, with an almost loving gaze at Felt's fear. "I'll just kill everyone here, and then I'll pick that badge up from the sea of blood afterwards," said Elsa, all while holding the expression of an affectionate mother on her face. She then tilted her head and continued on cruelly. "You aren't able to do your job. Do you really expect me not to throw away something that's useless to me?" Felt's face twisted as if in pain, but the emotion behind it was not of fear, but something else. Elsa's words must have touched upon something sensitive deep inside her. Subaru didn't know what that was, but... "Don't give me that, you bitch!" It was enough for Subaru to shout out in anger at Elsa, and to forget about how weak he was compared to her. Elsa turned and looked at Subaru, surprised, and she wasn't the only one. Felt and Rom turned to Subaru, and even Nasatella with no exception. However, the one most surprised was none of them. It was Subaru. He couldn't understand himself. Just why was he so angry? In part because he could not understand it. As this emotion rose up inside him, he spit all of it out. Is it really that fun for you to pick on such a little kid and test an obsessed sadist? Just because things aren't going exactly the way you planned, you're going to wreck everything and throw a tantrum? What are you, 5? How about you treasure life for once? Don't you know how much it hurts to have your stomach ripped open? I know. What are you trying to say? I'm just taking this moment to let the unforeseen sense of justice inside me rant about the injustice of this damn world. And right now, to me, the injustice of this world is you and this situation. So right now, I'm channeling all of my anger and about everything onto you. As Subaru's shouting continued to make no sense to her, Elsa let out a rare, exasperated sigh. But while Subaru was kind of hurt by her not serious reaction with spit flying, he shouted one more time. "All right, that's enough buying for her. Get her, Puck." "That was such an amazingly lame triad there. I was to write it down and leave it for future generations. Guess I'll have to respond to your expectations, huh?" Compared with Subaru's shouting and stomping, Puck's voice was aloof and detached. Elsa immediately looked up, but all around her, from all sides, were sharpened icicles, more than 20 in all. "It seems I haven't introduced myself, little lady. My name is Puck. I'd like it if you had at least remembered my name, as you say farewell to this world." Immediately afterwards, the icicles flew at Elsa. The crisscrossing icicles whipped up a white mist, and Elsa's black coat was lost in the low-temperature storm. The speed of the icicles was far greater than what Subaru had seen in the alley. He could just barely follow them with his eyes. Subaru thought that the sharp-tipped icicles would easily cut through Elsa's body. The tips of the clear bullets stained red with blood. There were 20 of them. If any of them hit the mark, it should be lethal. However...
"Did we get her?"
said Rom. "Now why'd you have to go and say that?" Subaru yelled back. Even though Rom had been quiet all this time, he had said the worst possible thing at the worst possible moment. "It pays to be prepared. I don't like wearing it because it's heavy, but it looks like I was right to wear it this time." Cutting through the white smoke, Elsa leapt out with her black hair dancing behind her. She had her kukri held high in her hand, and in her light steps it appeared she had no injuries. Other than the fact that she had thrown off her black coat and was only wearing her black skin-tight outfit, she looked no different from before. "You're not going to tell me that because that coat is so heavy, that just by shedding it you're suddenly a lot faster, are you?" That would be interesting, but the truth is simple. That coat has a formula woven into it that can ward off magic a single time. It looks like it saved my life. Elsa politely answered Subaru's question before kneeling down and striking upwards with the tip of her knife. The target was not Stella, and the strike was aimed to drive the knife into her chest. Subaru instinctively started to cry out, but I'd like it if you didn't underestimate spirit mages. We're pretty frightening if you make enemies of us. Stella clapped her hands together in front of her chest, forming a multi-layered ice shield that was easily pierced by Elsa's blade. But it took the knife and stopped her attack. Elsa immediately leapt back to retreat a few smaller icicles hurled her way. The counterattack was due to Puck, who was standing on Stella's shoulder by her silver hair, sweeping his arms this way and that, like a battle commander. One manages defense and the other attacks. In reality, it's 2 against 1, said Subaru, impressed.
That's the tricky thing about spirit mages. One will attack, and the other defends. Depending on the situation, one might use simple magic, buying for time, and the other prepares a special attack. That's why we need to, on the battlefield, say, when you meet a spirit mage, lay down your weapons and wallet and run, muttered Rom, still gripping his club. Subaru nodded. It didn't look as though the pairing between a spirit mage and their spirit could be easily beat. By the way, old man, what is it you're planning on doing? I'm looking for an opening so I can help out that elf girl. Of the two, she seems the one more willing to listen to us.
Wait. No! You only get in their way. If you go out there, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to lose your right arm and have your throat slit. Stay right where you are.
Don't say that. The way you put it makes it sound like I've already been cut down.
As Subaru had seen Rom get cut down twice already, his words had a sense of truth in their tone. As if Rom was feeling what had happened to him in those different dimensions, he put his hands on his arm and neck. While Subaru was able to talk Rom out of it, the truth was that the fight between Elsa and Stella was so intense, it didn't look like there was anywhere anyone could cut in. Countless ice shards had been created and were flying all over the room. However, in the midst of all of that, the way Elsa was handling it could only be described as superhuman. She would spin around, duck down, so low it looked as though she were crawling on the ground, and at times she would step on the walls and evade attacks as though she were completely ignoring gravity. If even with all of that she didn't seem able to dodge an attack, she would use her blade to cut through the ice crystals and shatter them. She had paired with what her opponent could do in number with an overwhelming degree of skill. She looks used to fighting, despite being a woman, muttered Puck, impressed with Elsa's godlike skills and fighting sense. Well, it's been a really long time since someone's called me a girl. From my perspective, most people I deal with are like babies to me. But even so, you're so strong I almost feel like I should pity you. To be complimented by spirits such as yourself, I must say I'm honored. As Elsa gladly took Puck's praise, she fended off another shard of ice with her knife. Almost 100 pieces of ice must have been thrown at her, but other than that very first attack, it didn't seem as though a single one of them had made their mark. I think if they keep this up, Elsa will tire out before they do. I'm still anxious, said Subaru.
That woman in black's movements really are incredible, but I don't think they can lose if they continue to hold the advantage in numbers. But it's not like that spirit will be able to keep itself here forever. As soon as that spirit's out, the balance of power will shift,
replied Rom. Damn, you're right. How soon is it to 5 o'clock? The first time around, Puck went to sleep just a little after sunset. It wasn't as though much time had passed since the start of the battle. But with this much magic use, wouldn't it be using all of his stored mana or whatever? Just when things were starting to get fun. It pains me to see that something else is distracting you from paying attention to me, muttered Elsa as she twisted her body to dodge an icicle attack, confirming Subaru's fears. As a popular male, it really is tough on me. I never put the girls to sleep. However, if you stay up too late, it's bad for your skin, replied Puck in a light tone, but he didn't deny what she was saying. Just as Subaru was beginning to worry that Puck had reached his limit, Elsa's movement suddenly stopped. In response, Puck winked his black eyes at her. Don't you think it's time we draw the curtain on this performance? When we keep repeating the same act, it begins to get boring. My foot. As soon as Elsa tried to take a step, she fell forwards, catching herself with her hands on the ground. Elsa's right foot had been frozen to the floor. The fragments of the ice shards Elsa had broken had piled up on the ground, and some had served as a way to bind Elsa's feet. You didn't really think that I was scattering all of these things around for no reason, did you? I guess this means you've got me. Just blame it on the gap in our ages. You have plenty of room to congratulate yourself for getting this far. Now, good night. Throwing his chest out, Puck's body, still standing on Noxatella's shoulder, started to oscillate at a high frequency. Puck was posed as he was about to release his ultimate move, which, with both paws out in front, focusing more magic than ever before, and Subaru watched as that magic was shot off like an arrow. The magic did not take the shape of ice, but was simply a load of destructive energy. Along the path of the bluish-white light, everything froze, and in one fell swoop, the loot cellar was filled with white. The energy passed through Elsa and broke into the door that formed the entrance to the cellar, blowing it off its hinges, and residual freezing energy from the attack even reached outside. As the brilliant light from the attack passed, everything was frozen, from the counter to the stolen items, to even the ground they lay on. Of course, if directly hit, even a human being would quickly turn into an ice statue, but... It can't be, said Puck. Of course it can. That was wonderful. I really thought I was going to die there. This was all assuming the attack would hit. With you being a girl, I can't say I approve. While Puck's attack was dodged, Puck didn't seem any angrier than what his words conveyed. He simply wasn't happy with what Elsa had done. Subaru saw blood dripping, and a bit of steam was rising from the frozen ground. The blood was coming from Elsa's right foot. She was standing barefoot, just out of the line of fire from Puck's attack, and bleeding profusely from her right foot, and it wasn't hard to see why. After all, she had sliced off the sole of her foot. I was afraid I might lop the whole foot off, seeing as how I heard. That was a close one. Even if you only cut that much, it must hurt a lot, said Puck. Well, yes, you're right, but it's wonderful. It makes me feel alive. In addition to that, in response to Puck's worried-sounding words, Elsa nodded with a look of ecstasy in her eyes, and without hesitation pushed her bleeding foot against a piece of ice. A sound that sounded like air shattering came erotically from Elsa's throat, and then immediately afterwards she took her knife to the ice around her foot. With that, she managed to stop the bleeding with the ice. It's a little hard to move, but this should be enough, said Elsa with a laugh, clicking her ice shoe against the ground, looking as though she was having fun. Subaru had no words to say in response to how Elsa's addiction to fighting left her without any hesitation when it came to maiming herself. But right now it was her opponent, Noxatella, who was in trouble. Puck, do you think you can keep going? Whispered Noxatella. I'm sorry, but I'm really tired. I think I really underestimated her. At this rate, I'm going to disappear from having run out of mana. Puck replied, for the first time, without the confidence that had filled his voice before. As the cat stood on Noxatella's shoulder, its figure began to shine, and looked as though it would fade at any moment. They were at a time. I'll find a way to handle the rest of my own, so go ahead and rest. Thank you. If something happens, I'll obey my contract. If need be, call me out, even if you have to use your own, said Puck with a warning, as his body disappeared in a wisp of mist. Subaru bit his lip, but he wasn't the one most disappointed by Puck's departure. Ah, you're going away. That's terribly unfortunate, said Elsa, the one who had been fighting with Puck with her life on the line. She sounded truly disappointed. She raided her cookery again, and with the high-pitched click of her icy shoe, began to head towards Satella. A number of icicles materialized around Noxatella in response, but there were far fewer than when Puck was with her. Even though Elsa had her movement limited now, the match appeared even.
It looks like we can't just sit around and watch this anymore, can we?
Said Rom, gripping his club and getting ready to move.
I don't know who's gonna win this anymore, so if we just wait around, we're gonna miss our chance. You understand, right, Felt?
Continued Rom. I know. Whether we help or run, we're going to have to make a move soon, said Felt, talking for the first time since Elsa threatened her. Felt moved beside Rom and then turned to Subaru. About what you said before. Thanks. It made me feel better. Huh? Only a little bit. Plus, don't call me a little kid. I'm 15 years old. You're not much older than me, right? Actually, I'll be 18 this year. I'll be able to get a license to drive a car, and I can get married too. You can't be that old. Your face looks younger than mine. Age a little, why don't you? At least on your face. Well, Subaru had lived his years lazily in the peaceful country of Japan, aiming to live every day as ordinary as possible, so it couldn't be helped. Subaru felt as though his lack of determination was being mocked, and so he looked down at the ground, feeling useless. The weakest one here was Subaru, and it was enough that he was completely lacking in the ability to fight, but also, my legs just can't stop shaking. I guess this is what happens when you lack resolve. Forget about being qualified to fight. Subaru was physically unable to. Rom had strength in his arms and Felt strength in her legs, and Natsutella had strength in her magic, and so all of them could manage to fight. However, Elsa's abnormality trumped all of those abilities.
It looks like she's starting to get pushed back,
said Rom, and that was enough to completely describe what was happening. Natsutella hadn't stopped shooting projectiles at Elsa, but Elsa just slapped them away with her blade, rendering them useless. In response to Elsa's dance of slicing attacks, Natsutella would block the attacks with her ice shield, and freeze the ground in front of her feet to slide away, barely dodging Elsa's continuing attacks. After Natsutella gained some distance, she would continue her barrage, but you could not deny that her position was inferior to Elsa's. To change the current situation, some kind of support was absolutely necessary.
Alright, I'm going.
Apparently Rom had thought the same as Subaru, and after letting out a yell, Rom joined the fight. As Rom swung his club, it brought a gust of air along with it, and as Elsa ducked, her hair was caught up a little in the blast. Oh, how rude of you to interrupt our dance, said Elsa.
If you want to dance that much, then I'll make you dance a fine dance, so give it your best shot.
As Rom swung his thorny pointed club at Elsa, he changed his line of attack. He thrust the club towards Elsa's throat, but Rom froze at the result.
What the hell is this?
I'm only able to do this because you're so strong, said Elsa from above as she stood on the tip of Rom's club. That kind of technique could only be accomplished with a godlike sense of balance. Before that balance could be broken, Elsa swung her blade horizontally at Rom. The strike was level with Rom's forehead. If it landed, the top of his head would be sent flying. You think I'd let you? Shing went the sound of Elsa's sword as it collided with a knife thrown by Felt. The collision had altered the path of Elsa's sword, but the side of it still collided full force into the side of Rom's head. A dull sound rang out as Rom toppled over to the side. What a naughty little girl, said Elsa as she landed lightly back on the ground and turned just her eyes towards Felt. Felt's small knife had saved Rom's life. She probably had aimed for Elsa's arm, but in the rush of the moment her aim was a little off. However, without the slight miss, Rom might not have been saved. You don't have the determination or power to fight. You should have just cowered in the corner like a good little girl. The high-pitched click of Elsa's step rang out as she instantly closed the distance between herself and Felt. Rom was unconscious, and Natsutella, who had been trying to keep her distance, was now too far away. Felt herself had frozen like a frog being stared down by a snake, and... Ah! So the only one who was able to tackle her to safety was the coward who had been shivering beside her moments before.